Everybody that formed me were people that I grew up with. It was like, because they're all storytellers. They would just kind of tell stories all the time. My uncles, my aunties, my mum, my dad, the neighbours, all the other kids that I grew up with. We'd sit at school, you know, you'd sit there and somebody would just start chatting and telling the story over the weekend, you know. And it just carried on from there into the pub. People would do the same thing. When you left school, we'd all sit in the pub and we just start gassing on about what you'd done. And the stories were performed. You know, it was that kind of Celtic oral storytelling tradition. People would just get up and they'd never think about writing them down, but they'd get up and perform the most incredible and outlandish and hilarious and funny stories. That's what formed me as a writer, definitely. But it's funny, you know, it's funny. I mean, I've written loads and loads of stuff, and I remember, you know, when I think about it, when I started writing, I wrote Trainspotting, The Acid House, Marabou Stork Nightmares, Ecstasy, and Glue. Sorry, Filth and Glue, all in about 5 or 6 years, basically. Now, if I'd taken 30 years to do that, I would have been hailed as some great literary genius. But because I just knocked them out very quickly, it's almost like kind of. People think, oh, you can't be any good if you're just knocking books out like that. You know, it's almost like there has to be this idea that you have to be all intense and sort of chin strokey and tortured, and this is horrible, this is such a struggle, and my life is terrible and all. It's not, it's the funnest, easiest, most wonderful thing you can do. Just sit down and write a book. I was born in Leith, which is the port of Edinburgh. And my mum and dad were working class, kind of salt of the earth people, but kind of working class, kind of clued up working class people. Kind of quite sort of political, quite kind of cool, quite sexy in some of the pictures, the younger pictures that I've seen of them. And they were kind of very encouraging to me as a kid. I got kind of engrossed in the punk scene, tried to get a band together. Wasn't a very good musician, so continually got kicked out of bands when people progressed at a faster rate. I took a lot of jobs that I didn't really like doing. I found work very difficult. I found being in one place, going into a place, an office 9 to 5 or a factory 9 to 5, incredibly different. So I did a lot of diverse work. I did building work, I did clerical work, I did basically anything that I could, you know, and then I kind of, I stumbled on a management job. I met this guy called Morris who interviewed me. He was a clinical kind of psychologist guy. And he says, I've got a gut reaction about you, your management material. I'm going to give you a management job here. And I thought, this is great. You know, suddenly I'd come off the dole and suddenly I had this kind of quite a decent kind of wage. It was terrible at the job, but I could kind of talk. I could talk a good job, which is what management is, because people don't do anything, they just talk, basically. I worked for different organisations. I worked in Greater London, I worked back in Edinburgh, and I just got rapid promotions. And I was quite, you know, in between this was a period of heroin addiction when I was younger, and I was a bit kind of, I was a bit gun shy about drugs. I was settled down, had a nice wife, had a nice house, had a good job. And I was kind of not really happy in myself, despite that. I wanted to do something creative. Didn't work out for me with the music, so I gave the writing a try. I was very lucky that I was in Edinburgh again when the whole, there was a big kind of writing movement that kicked off there with Rebel Inc., Clock Tower Press, kind of spearheaded by Kevin Williamson, Duncan MacLean. There's a lot of great writers in Edinburgh at the time, like Alan Warner, Barry Graham, Laura Hurd, Gordon Legg, and we didn't really think how special and unique that was at the time, having all these people in this one place that were kind of coming out, putting on all these big readings, and Kevin and I put on the Invisible Insurrection Club. And I kind of got lost in Acid House. I got incredibly involved in the dance music scene, the burgeoning house scene, both in Edinburgh and then back in London. So I was obsessed with all that. I was obsessed with clubbing, and I got into DJing. I was obsessed with the whole sort of club culture, but I also got into writing, and I wrote my first novel, which became very successful, and then that's what I've been doing since, basically. I was quite a nice wee boy, actually. I was quite sort of, I didn't really, I was fascinated, obsessed with sport and obsessed with art, which you're not allowed to be And that was, you know, because this whole kind of world we live in, this whole division of labour thing, you've got to be one thing or the other. You've got to be a sporty kid or an arty kid. And I love football, I love boxing, I love running, but I also love kind of writing poems and kind of doing paintings and kind of writing essays and stuff. And you weren't really allowed to do both, you know. And I kept on getting into trouble because I wouldn't focus on one thing or the other. You know, I had two different sets of friends. I had the kind of tough, kind of hard, kind of wild kids that kind of were into kicking footballs around and all that. And also the kind of nerdy, sensitive kids that were into kind of writing poems and painting pictures, you know. And I didn't really want to give either of these kind of things up, basically. I liked people like, you know, Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, David Bowie, kind of later on, Shane MacGowan, Nick Cave, people who wrote ballads, who told stories, basically. They were storytellers. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a kind of balladeer. Because I couldn't do the music very well or good enough, so, you know, I didn't have the musicianship skills. I wasn't a great guitarist or a great keyboardist. So I ended up just kind of dropping that for you know, making a virtue of necessity and just going with the story, basically. I had a very encouraging teacher when I was at school called Mrs. Tate, and she said that I met her one time when I was working as a TV mechanic in the street, and she said to me, "Are you still writing?" And that really shocked me because I thought that writing was just something you did at school. In essence, you didn't do it in later life. There was no kind of point to that, like, you know. And I thought, well, I actually do like doing this. That's the point of it, you know, I actually like it, you know, so do it, basically. And again, a lot of things coalesced, you know, I kind of, I was fortunate in a way that I had a period of heroin abuse because it was like I was trying to understand how I got into that place, and you know, it was like, you know, and I think Trainspotting was a way, the first book was a way of me trying to figure out how did I get into this place, because there's so many people that get into that. They get into it for all sorts of reasons, like maybe they've been kind of, maybe they've got depression issues, maybe mental illness problems, maybe they've got anxiety issues, maybe they've been abused as children, maybe they've kind of, they've had some kind of physical pain that, you know, the medication hasn't helped with, but, you know, like back pains that, you know, heroin helps with. And I couldn't understand because I had none of these things going on with me, but at the same time there I was, you know, sort of, so it was like to me trying to kind of, from a position of strength really, from looking back and, you know, and trying to unpick and unravel how this all came about. And not a lot of people knew that I had this issue with heroin until it got to the point, it always gets to a point where you can't disguise it anymore, and it becomes evident. You've got a whole different set of friends, a whole different set of relationships, you dress differently, you look different, you speak in a different voice. You kind of, I don't know why, but there's a kind of metallic, kind of nasal voice that everybody's, and I don't know where it comes from, but it's something that, it's a cultural thing, you know. I could actually hear my voice change because everybody else is speaking in that way, you know. But it's also like, you know, so I think it becomes like an identity as well. You know, you become, you know, the junky identity becomes something that you kind of embrace because it's, in some ways it's a kind of romantic outlaw identity, but that never lasts. That whole point, that's just a little affectation and then it becomes a matter of trying to get your medicine, get yourself sorted out so you can kind of lead a semi-normal life. But for me it was like, because there was nothing driving it, it became too much hard work. You know, I thought this is not something that I want to be doing really. It's like just a waste of time for me. It's not masking any pain or anything like that, it's just causing me pain. So there was no real motivation to continue. Because the drug's highly addictive, getting off it is difficult, but it's something that is, the physical side of it is kind of horrible, but it only lasts kind of 3-4 weeks and then you're fine. And then you've got the psychological dependency is the kind of big thing that you have to deal with. I didn't really have that to any massive extent. I just felt glad that I came out the other side of it. No, I couldn't write anything at all when I was on drugs, especially on heroin. I mean, I couldn't just, I just wanted to stare at walls all the time, you know, or kind of gape endlessly at sort of cartoons on TV. I don't know how many episodes of Tom and Jerry I watched, like, you know. I feel that, I always had I always had a problem with writing on drugs. I never saw it as, even I would come in, if I came in on ecstasy or cocaine or something like that, I would just want to go up and dance or party or go for a drink. I wouldn't want to sit typing at a sort of, a computer. It'd be the last thing I would do. What I did like, back in the day, I liked it when I was coming off. I was on a come down, or I was kind of on a hangover. These were always quite good times to write because your senses are very acute at that time. Not in a good way, but you're almost like kind of running away from the hangover. Yeah, I remember I went across to America to see a girlfriend and to see an aunt in Texas and a girlfriend in LA. And I was on the Greyhound bus kind of a lot at the time. I had nothing to do, so I started doodling and just little stories and little kind of sketches. And I didn't really think much about them. They were just like kind of the usual kind of musings and meanderings, and like they were like junky tales that I kind of experienced, but putting myself in a very kind of self-aggrandizing position above everybody else, and they were quite pompous basically, but they were kind of good in a way, I think, and then when I thought I want to do some writing, I found these journals basically, and they were the kind of they became the basis of Trainspotting really, and I kind of thought that to start this off, I've got to get past myself basically, because whenever you've got to be a bit egotistical to write, because you've got to think that your story is worth telling, or you've got stories worth telling, but you've also got to get past yourself, I think, to be a writer. It can't be about you, because you're not that interesting. So I started to construct characters based on not so much kind of people that I know and people that I met, and kind of fusing sort of different traits together and taking and sort of and trying to get a kind of draw rounded characters from that, and put them all together in the room and let them tell the story. I think one of the things that kind of I discovered when I was doing my kind of my investigative kind of book about why I got into drugs, I realised that a lot of it is in the relationship between the Renton character and the sick boy character. I think neither of these guys would have been into heroin if they hadn't have met each other. So I think they were different from characters like Spud and Tommy and sort of and Keysbo and all the other guys who were kind of drugs filled a void for them because it was a collapse of work. I mean, in most communities, drugs replace work. Basically, it gave people something to do. In some structure to their life, and it was also a painkiller, for this existential depression about what did we do next. I don't think that for Renton and Sick Boy it was like that. I think it was these two characters meeting, and I had a kind of a couple of friendships whereby you would compete with each other to see who could be the most fucked up. Basically, you could take things about one step further in all sorts of ways, so. I think that Folly Ado thing was quite a big part of it too. I think probably, originally from Trainspotting, certainly probably Renton. But I think you get close to all your characters when you write them. I think that, I felt, when I wrote Porno, for example, I felt closer to Sick Boy, and I felt I was kind of more like him at that point. And I think you do bring your own stuff to the character, basically. You have to, because you're writing them. But I think, again, they are still compositions, so it's a weird sort of, it's a weird soup that you're kind of brewing. I don't think it was bleak, really. I think it was quite uplifting and fun. It looks bleak from the outside looking in, but I think that, you see it in the book, you see it in the movie, you see it in the stage play of Trainspotting. It's a very vital piece about youth. It's about people trying to cope with deindustrialization, with the transition into a society without work. And I think the reason that it's continued to resonate is because everybody now, even the middle classes, are in the same existential angst. We're thinking, what do we do? How do we transition to a non-wage economy, to a world that we don't have paid work? And these guys had to face that question right back in the 80s. It's funny. I mean, you sit down there, and I mean, certainly for the first drafts, I tend to let the subconscious do the heavy lifting, do all the work. So you don't really know. Basically, you just sit there and type, and you get lost in it, and you go into this place, and next thing you know, there's like kind of 20,000 words in front of you, and you look at it and you think, where did this come from, basically. Then you go away and you take it out, print it off, take it out to a cafe, sit down and look through it and see, can this actually be usable in any way? What are the themes that are coming out of it? What are the characters that are emerging? What is the storyline that's coming out of this? So that's what I do. It's just like it's almost like sculpture. You get this whole big piece of clay, and then you sort of you start to push it into something that looks sort of a bit like the figure you're trying to carve. Well, when Trainspotting first came out, my mum was a bit sort of concerned. It was like you shouldn't be washing your dirty laundry in public and all that kind of stuff. And of course, when it started to get acclaim and sold loads and loads and loads, she kind of was like, yeah. So I think it's like it's interesting that the success of something changes it. Changes people's perception of you. You go from being this kind of junky loser that's written this memoir into this kind of sort of big kind of artist and this massively talented person. So life, it's not, neither of these things are true, but life is very perceptual in that way. When I sold 1,000 copies just to friends, basically, I bought it, and it was like, great stuff. Sold 10,000 copies. Oh, well done, you're doing great. 100,000 copies, like, 1,000,000 copies, you sold out, you bastard, and all that. So that kind of that happens basically, But that was it. I mean, one regret I do have is my dad died before the book came out, and he wasn't able to sort of. Maybe it's a good thing. he might not have liked it, but he wasn't big on drugs, So, I'm sure he would have liked the success of it. I think my mum was delighted that it was successful because I was able to kind of buy her house and double glaze it and sort of put a new kitchen and bathroom in and all that. But otherwise, it's just I'm watching EastEnders. But she reads all the books and she seems to enjoy them, or most of them she enjoys. Right? I think the greatest thing you learn from writing a novel, and it doesn't matter whether it's a successful novel or a kind of or not so successful, but and Trainspotting is obviously very successful, but the most important lesson you learn is that you can actually do that. You can finish a book, you can send it off and get it published, and I was on a roll. I mean, I finished the stories of the Acid House straight away, and then I wrote a novel which was terrible. It was a mess. It was an experimental novel. I think I photocopied my gas bill about 50 times and stuck it in there, because I thought everybody kind of was telling me how brilliant I was basically at that time, and it kind of went to my head, and I thought I can do anything now. So I just wrote this mad kind of crazy lot of nonsense basically, and I used some of it. Some of it was usable and interesting, but the rest of it was just rubbish. And thankfully I had a really good editor who's still my editor and a good friend, and he said to me, this is rubbish, it's nonsense, it's the worst book I've ever read, it's a mess, and it's a mess because you're showing off, you're not actually thinking about what you want to write about. Write the book you want to write. And I did. I went away and wrote Marabou Stalk Nightmares, which was probably my best book in some ways. So it was good advice. It's like just write the book you want to write, and it's not. It's obvious. It's an obvious thing to say, but it was great advice for me. Like me, I'm a working writer. I've always got something on the go. I've always got a piece of work, whether it's a book or a stage play or a film script or a teleplay. There's always something that I'm immersed in. And when you're immersed in that, you're immersed in that world, and everything else means nothing. Basically, it's gone. If I look at all the books, if I go into a bookstore and I see all the books in the shelves with my names on them, it means nothing more to me than anybody else's books in there. It's just another book. I've got no kind of connection to it. It's gone, from me. There's no emotional connection to it at all. The only thing that I'm focused on is the one that I'm doing now, and that's the real fun when you're a writer. The fun is actually in writing. It's like when you talk about a book, it comes out, and then you talk about it. it's usually a year old or 2 years old by the time you talk about it, and you know nothing about it because you've forgotten. So you rely on people to tell you what it's about when you do the kind of round the press and stuff. I think the thing about characters, to me, I don't really have any emotional connection to them until I use them to write with. I mean, they're a set of tools in a box, basically, and it doesn't matter who they are. Sometimes sometimes you kind of have to, sometimes you have to forge new tools. Sometimes you can use the ones you've got. So it's kind of, it just, it's like they're just there, basically, and when you bring them out, you're immersed in what they're doing again, but you don't really care otherwise. I mean, I get all this stuff about Trainspotting's this generational defining thing. It's a big moment and cultural moment and all this stuff. You can't really be responsible for how the book's received. I mean, you kind of, I've written books that are a lot better than Trainspotting. I've written books that are a lot worse than Trainspotting, and I doubt probably, it's very hard to get that kind of reception with another book, basically. But you don't really care about that. You just want to do the best one that you can, and you're immersed in that one at the time. Why would you want to think about something that you've got no control over? There's no point. You're pleased that people like it and they kind of, they vibe on it and they get on with it. It's delightful, but it's not something that you can see. I'm not really. I've talked about this with some friends, and it's like kind of. I'm not really big on. I'm big on something as a piece of work. I kind of think I'm not really that interested in the writer of it. I'm not. I don't read biographies. I'm not. If I see a great movie, I don't want to learn everything about the director. If I read a great book, I don't want to read every single thing that the writer's written. It's like I'm very much centered on the actual piece of work. I think this is a great piece of work, and I think that a lot of people who become artists of any kind, whether they're musicians or writers or painters or whatever, I think they tend to do that. They tend to focus on work and they appreciate rather than the actual artist or person. So I kind of just think, I want to get a piece of work as good as I can possibly make it, and that's all that I'm concerned about. Yeah, I mean, I did become quite famous in the 90s, and maybe still am in some ways, I suppose, but it's something that you kind of enjoy. You enjoy fortune more than fame, because you can just you can go places and spend money and have fun and all that, and you don't have to worry about kind of red bills and stuff like that. Fame's kind of like, it doesn't really, it's one of these things that it's fun for a bit, and you think, oh, everybody recognises me, I'm cool, and then you think, this is a pain in the arse, man. I just want to live somewhere where people don't want to talk about kind of books all the time or movies all the time. Yeah, I think one of the things when you do get recognised, it's like, it's different now than it was when I started off. There's no selfies back then and kind of camera phones, and it's like, it's bizarre that anybody would want to get the picture taken with me. I find that kind of really strange still. Just because I feel that most people in the world have got a picture of me now, and they put it on their Facebook or their Instagram. Nobody's going to look at it. Nobody cares. But if they care, that's cool. Well, the kind of, if I've done anything, I've created a genre of writing which I think is like sort of I would call kind of post-industrial adjustment, and it's about people who are adjusting to a whole different way of life. They're adjusting to the change in society from a capitalist society into a conceptualist society where you don't make physical goods, and physical goods are made at zero cost. So it's not a wage economy, and you're having to sort of think. We're also living in this era where machines and automation are replacing us, robots are replacing us. So there's an existential crisis of kind of, what are we here for? What's the purpose of us? And this is a question that humanity faces. And the first people that experienced that were the industrial working classes, because they were the first victims of that whole technological change. And that's what I'm writing about. That's what I'm writing about, people's reaction to their kind of emotional and physical redundancy, as as what we're doing as a species. And I think that's why the kind of the book has resonated for so long, or the writing in general has resonated for so long, because it's about transition. It's about that kind of transition, and it's not a book about kind of a middle-class couple going to Tuscany and falling in love and falling out of love, which is a kind of standard kind of the standard kind of English literature kind of fare, basically. which is, you know, which is the stuff that's kind of held as kind of great life-affirming writing. I like to think that I'm kind of hunting bigger game than that, and I'm looking at something that is much more sort of resonant and crucial to people's lives today. And that might be pretentious and pompous on my part, but that's the way I feel about it. I mean, I've got the soul of a novelist. I'm always asking the what if question, you know, so anything that happens, I'm asking what if this happened instead, or what if it was a little bit like this. So everything I have, I'm transforming. I very rarely use something verbatim. I might use something that somebody said that's quite amusing, or somebody said that's funny, that can't be beaten. Or I might use a physical description of somebody that I find quite interesting, or a mannerism that's quirky. But in terms of story, in terms of what actually happens in the narrative, I'm generally transforming things. I'm embellishing, or in some cases I'm toning down, because, you know, it's the old cliche about the truth being stranger than fiction. I think sometimes the truth is so extreme that you have to kind of you have to pare it down to suit the character you've written. I think the way fiction is operating now is that you're going to have more. You're going to have more and more adaptations, and I think it's almost the purpose of writing a novel now is to have it adapted for screen in some ways. Have it adapted for a long-form TV. You see a lot of kids now kind of running around, you know, watching binge watching kind of, you know, Netflix shows on their phone, and that to me seems strange because the production values are so high. I want to watch a show with a big screen and big speakers, and here, you know, and you know, you have the full impact of the technology. But it's almost like people are kind of are treating the phone like, you know, they're treating the phone and treating the Netflix show like a book. They're just they're wandering around. So in some ways, these are the new books, basically. And I think that the book is written not with you. You have to write it as a novel, but when it's dropped into this whole commercial kind of miasma of different kind of you know, of publishing, of production, of film and TV production, and kind of this whole cultural kind of sort of apparatus, that there's a perception that it'll kind of move into something. I mean, as soon as I finish a book, my manager is saying, you know, well, he's a Hollywood guy, but he's going, what is this book? What is this book? Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Pitch it to me. Pitch it to me. So it's almost like kind of there. He's thinking about it straight away in terms of his film, or not even film now. It's kind of long form TV kind of series potential. No, I've never seen any struggle and pain in writing. To me, it's just pure fun and joy, and there's not been any angst, or, you know, I think that comes in real life. That comes when you stop writing and you have to actually go out and sell the book and all that. That's where the pain comes in. But the actual writing of it is just absolutely fabulous. I would do it all day long if I could. My wife used to say to me, like, I never see you write. You know, but you know, you're always out doing stuff. You're always watching movies, or you're sitting in cafes chatting to people, or you're kind of you're going around museums and stuff like that, or exhibitions, and you're just playing music all the time. You're just listening to music, and but I never actually see you write. You know, so that's, I'm quite mysterious in that way. I'm a binger, you know, a binge writer. I store things up in my head, and then I'll just go and vanish for days and just bang it all out. Yeah. You have to let things you have to nourish yourself let the world nourish you in your experience in any kind of thing you do. If you're doing anything creative, make it come from the world. Make it come from the world that you're in. If you can't sit in your bedroom all day and suddenly, you know, expect to concoct a masterpiece. You've got to go out and live. And I remember when I was teaching at a university for kind of 6 months in order to get my green card for America, and I had to do teaching for 6 months, which I hated. You know, I kind of didn't. I mean, the students were brilliant, but I just didn't like kind of being there and looking at other people's stuff. I wanted to get on my own. And I remember saying, look, you know, I thought the older people that were kind of in their late 20s and upwards, you could see them benefiting from it. But they had a lot of life experience, you know. But the younger people who just went from kind of school to a BFA program to an MFA program, I would say to them, no, you know, get out and do some bar work and waitressing and kind of take a load of drugs and kind of sort of get into a stupid adventure and sort of, you know, and do something completely daft and irresponsible. You know, make sure you've got something to write about that's interesting. Instead of high school stories, every time I remember back in high school, I go, oh, fuck, here we go again. Well, I've been looking back, which is very strange and uncomfortable for me because I'm responding to questions, but I'm not really a looking back type of guy. I'm not a very reflective person. I'm like the shark who has to keep going forward, basically, kind of. So it's strange to look back, and it's because I'm very I'm a kind of in the moment person. I can only go about 2 weeks at a time, basically. So. You know, I'm working on a novel. I'm working on a few different film projects and ideas. But again, these things are like, you know, the thing that's kind of really I'm buzzing with now is the album that we're doing. That's kind of interesting to me because it feels like we've kind of I've always kind of had ambitions musically, but I've never been able to realize them. But it feels now that the team of people that I'm working with. It feels that I'm kind of realizing I'm doing the kind of stuff that I want to do now, you know. So that's kind of that's exciting. And again, it's, you know, I'm not really bothered about critical or commercial success. I'm just bothered about something that intrinsically feels important to me. Well, here I am in Buenos Aires. I'm at the Filba Literary Festival, and I'm also promoting my book. Which one is it? It's a decent ride that's just actually come out in Spanish. 2 books back from the last one I've written, and I'm kind of also DJing. I'm doing some kind of techno disco kind of fusion that, and presenting some tracks from an album that I finished with my friend Steve Mack in Brighton, and yeah, so a bit of a mixed bag really. I think the great thing about music is it's so immediate, basically, you know, and you know whether it's working or not. If you're DJing in a club, for example, and you put down a track, especially dance music, you know, because dance music, people have got to dance, basically, you know, and you bung it down, you know, is the energy in the room changed? Are they dancing or are they not dancing? You don't really get that feedback if you've written a novel. I remember I was on the Tube one time, and I think it was when Filth came out. Everybody bought Filth basically because it just, you know, it went to #1 in the charts. It was like everybody was waiting for this book basically, and just about everybody in the Tube seemed to have Filth. In this garage that I went in, they're all reading it, you know, and I thought, this is great. Everybody's got my book. This is so exciting, and but you're just sitting there reading it. You know, sometimes you're going like that or something, but you're not really seeing it on their face. You're not getting a mass reaction. You get in the cinema when we went to see the Trainspotting movie. It was like you could feel there was an energy there, people were feeling it, but the dance floor is something different again. You know, if you put down some tracks that are just kind of, you know, bang, you just know that people are going to go crazy. You know, it's like and you get that reaction, that joy, basically. You know, so it's a very rewarding thing to do, but it's a thing that a lot of people can do. A lot of people can play other people's records. You know. And a lot of people are very creative in the way they mix records together, very highly skilled at it, but essentially they're still playing other people's records. The trick is to make your own records that are really exciting, that are going to make people dance and jump and sing, and that's what I'm trying to do now, basically. Yeah, I mean, what's exciting is life. You know, you've got to be excited by life. You've got to kind of think, you know, that it's like you meet so many great people. You know, you meet great people at this festival. You're going to encounter people who are interesting and fascinating. They've got a lot of stories to tell. They've had a lot of experiences of, you know, of life and all that. And it's great. You know, it's great to be able to swap that, and you get inspired by that, and you get inspired by you can go to a bar down the street here, and because Argentina has got such a great education system, it historically has, people will talk about everything. You know, like we used to in Britain, you know, when I was a kid back in the 70s. Now all that's knocked out of us. We just talk about Sky TV and all that. Now we're being stupefied by the destruction of our education system. But they still have that in a place like Argentina. People will still kind of chat, and that's inspirational. That's fabulous. Yeah, I mean, I don't go out looking for stories or ideas or anything like that. I just like to immerse basically and have fun, and you know, and then they'll come to you. You know, I think you have to go out there, but you have to also let things come to you. You can't go out in search of ideas. They'll come to you quick enough. Well, again, I mean, I'm the kind of writer who tends to sort of let all the subconscious do all the heavy work. So you don't really know. It's a mystical process, really, like, you know, so just get as much in there as possible and let's see what comes out. I think writing a novel is an intrinsically moral act. You know, it's something that you kind of want to you want to say to the reader, this is the script I'm giving you to make the film that you want to make in your head, basically.